to ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to mitigate the impact of recent teacher strikes on children's education.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville.
The best way of mitigating this impact is to avoid industrial action. Strikes in our schools are in no one's interest, least of all for pupils, parents and carers, who have already faced significant disruption over the past 3 years. I remain absolutely committed to working closely with our union and local government partners to try and reach a deal on teachers' pay, which must be fair and affordable for all concerned. I am in regular dialogue with the unions in COSLA and spoke with them as recently as Friday, 6 January. As Mr Kerr will be aware, the provision of education in Scotland is the responsibility of local authorities. However, I have previously made clear that wherever strikes do occur, local authorities should undertake individual school risk assessments based on the availability of staff, with schools remaining open or remote learning provided wherever that is possible.
Stephen Kerr.
Well, I'm not very sure that I had a single answer in that long statement from the Cabinet Secretary. And I'm not sure I had anything either that brings any comfort to Scotland's parents, carers, or indeed the most important people, the pupils, especially those in their senior phase preparing for their important exams. So she's right that the obvious mitigation is to end a dispute, but the dispute's been going on before last April. So the Cabinet Secretary has said in the media, well, if you would like... I mean, you're the government. You're the government.
Excuse me.
You may be a shabby government, but you're the government.
Mr Kerr, can I ask you to sit down, please? Thank you. I would just advise all members that I am chairing this session, and I'd be grateful if we can hear the member when he's speaking. Mr Kerr.
The Cabinet Secretary has said in the media that there is room for negotiation. There is scope for a settlement. What is in scope? When will the strikes end? And was the Cabinet Secretary in the negotiating room yesterday?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the meetings that were on yesterday was a meeting of the SNCT, which government ministers do not attend, but government officials were there. And I was, as I say, in the room with trade unions and with COSLA on Friday. There have been a number of constructive talks recently, and I'd like to thank trade union colleagues and colleagues at COSLA for that, particularly on Friday and Monday. If Mr Kerr will forgive me, I'm not going to go into the detail of that, and that's not just a decision of the Scottish Government, but I don't think trade union colleagues would also thank me if we went into the details of private negotiations. That's not the way to settle a very detailed settlement that we will need to come to. But we are, of course, looking at considering all options to resolve this dispute, looking at the scope where there is compromise. But I would come back to the fact, as I've stated to trade union colleagues on a number of occasions, the Scottish Government has a fixed budget. It is already allocated for this year, and it has been eroded by inflation. No thanks in particular to the UK Government on that aspect. So we will work very closely to ensure we're doing everything we can to resolve the dispute. But it would be fair to say negotiations will have to continue as there remains some distance between us at this time.
Stephen Kerr.
I think, again, Scotland's parents and carers and pupils will be astonished. Why on earth wasn't the Cabinet Secretary even in the room? How on earth can there be a negotiation or a resolution if the Cabinet Secretary doesn't even negotiate? And frankly, this is typical. Teachers are on strike for the first time in 40 years because this SNP government have repeatedly let them down. They don't want to strike, but she's letting teachers down. She's letting pupils down. So, I have one more question to ask, obviously. So let me see if I can get a specific answer. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to set out one practical idea she and her government have to help pupils catch up and avoid them falling further behind?
Cabinet Secretary.
First answer.
Well, I gave some of the details on that in my first answer, and there is, of course, a number of areas where, because of the impacts of COVID, we have eSchool and we have a number of remote learning initiatives that are assisted by national agencies, but the responsibility for remote learning also lies, quite rightly, with the schools. But quite frankly, Presiding Officer, on the day where UK Government ministers are standing up in Westminster and bringing in anti-trade union law legislation, I will take no no lectures from Mr Kerr or any other Conservative member of this Parliament saying that we should be doing more to actually settle disputes, because we know what happens when the Tories are in power. We're seeing that at Westminster. You compare that to what we have done up here in Scotland, where we are having constructive discussions. That's the way how you solve disputes. And I think, quite frankly, Mr Kerr's questions today show a lack of understanding of how the SNCT works, a lack of understanding about negotiations and dispute resolutions, and I will take no lessons from him because of that, but particularly because of the anti-trade union legislation brought through once again by the Conservatives at Westminster.
Co-Cap Stewart.